All right, our first presenter today, I've known for almost 13 years now, I guess. And it's Chris Hoidal, who is the regional director for PHMSA, and I'm going to give a little lesson, a little alphabet soup lesson here. PHMSA is part of the U.S. Department of Transportation, so sometimes you'll hear it called U.S. Department of Transportation, DOT. You'll hear it called PHMSA, which is Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or you'll hear it called the Office of Pipeline Safety, OPS. They're all kind of interchangeable, and depending on who's standing up here, you may hear any of them, but you can just think about them as the feds, if you want. And Chris, I got to know him because he was the regional director at the time that the Bellingham incident occurred in 1999, and he was also very instrumental in the part of the investigation and the response here in Salt Lake City, too. So as soon as I can get his presentation to come up, which is right there, we are good to go. Chris Hoidal. Up and down buttons.
Hello everyone, how are you? I want to thank first the Pipeline Safety Trust for inviting us here, the communities of Salt Lake City, and particularly the mayor's office. One reason I think things went relatively well after the June and December spills on Chevron is I had somebody I knew I could go to. There was representation, there was a single point of contact where I could get information from the community as well as the emergency responders, and we could actually collaborate on how to move forward after, during and after the incident. So I want to commend the mayor's office for that. What I'm going to be talking about today is kind of give you an overview at a 30,000-foot level of what we are doing to make pipelines safer. I think to do that, I know there's a whole bunch of different stakeholders here with different amounts of knowledge. I want to kind of say who we are, kind of give the backstory before I get into what our agenda is for this year. Okay, today I'm going to cover some basics on pipeline safety, where these pipelines are and why you care. Who is PHMSA? As Carl said, we go by many different names. Perspectives on past performance and risk. 4 more years, what we just had new legislation, and also talk about our agency priorities for 2012. There were some earlier diagrams. As you can see, pipelines are virtually everywhere. They crisscross the nation. They've been put in. They range in age from the turn of the century. I'm not talking about the last, 2000, but the previous century. There's 2.5 million miles of pipe, and there's no place that you don't have pipelines. Okay, breakdown. You have 176,000 miles of hazardous liquid pipelines. When you say hazardous liquid, we're talking about petroleum products, refined products, hazardous volatile liquids. We have 322,000 miles of gas transmission pipelines, similar to what you had in San Bruno, and over 2 million miles of distribution pipelines. So those are what deliver gas to your house. And they're growing. There is a lot of development. They're constantly growing. Okay, basics on pipeline safety. Okay. Well, the U.S. Congress basically creates the pipeline safety laws. The first ones were created in the late 1960s. Every 4 years or so, they reauthorize them. The Congress directs the Secretary of Transportation to carry out the pipeline safety laws. It also allows us, and this is critical, allows us to partner with the states to actually implement these laws. The Secretary delegates his authority to the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. Everybody's familiar with FAA, everybody's familiar with federal highways, everybody's familiar with NHTSA. But PHMSA is a smaller agency. It's only a few hundred people. We have 110 inspectors in the field, about 200 employees nationwide. So we are a small administration within the DOT, but I think people are getting to know us as PHMSA. We've always been known as DOT, OPS, but PHMSA is what, basically our moniker that is gaining more recognition. We carry out our mandates through regulations, inspections, and enforcement, and some non-regulatory programs. And this is really key. The states, we partner with our states to do a lot of our inspections. There's 300 inspectors in the state. They're usually inspecting the intrastate the interstate natural gas systems, or in some states they look at the interstate liquid or hazardous liquid systems. I believe in this state your primary interstate natural gas is Questar. And there it's the Utah Public Service Commission is responsible for basically overseeing the distribution systems and enforcing them. So why do you care? I think Carl's, those videos, I got to get a copy of those videos. That is why you care. I mean, pipeline safety, it's not a sexy topic. It's not in the news usually. I mean, Keystone XL has it in the news, but it's something that you don't usually hear about until something goes wrong. Yeah, the probability of a pipeline accident occurring, very small. Consequences, huge. And what makes it even worse, these are risks that you don't accept. You know, you go down to ski run, you decide to go into the terrain park, you accept that risk. But you don't accept, you don't know about that pipeline that explodes in your backyard. It just feels worse when somebody else is imposing risk on you. Pipelines are being built from the Rockies to the West Coast, the East Coast, from the Appalachians. They're going to populated areas. Crude oil pipelines are being proposed out of Canada. And Utah is right in the bullseye. You guys have a lot of pipelines coming out of Colorado, coming out of Wyoming, crossing your state, going towards points west. Here's an example. Just last year, actually, it started in late 2011. Late 2010. But this is a pipeline being constructed from Opal, Wyoming, all the way to Oregon. It was a massive project, almost 700 miles, 42-inch diameter pipe, and it crossed the Wasatch Mountains, went across the Great Salt Lake, just north of Great Salt Lake, and on into Nevada, and then into Malin, Oregon. We inspect those things, but those are coming across your community. They're large crews. There's a lot to look at. There may be as many as 6-7 spreads working at a time. When I say spread, basically 6 or 7 construction crews all working simultaneously. This is called the El Paso Ruby Pipeline. It actually was built almost 700 miles in a little over a year. It's quite the undertaking. So you have construction, but then also you have national events that you see. Here's San Bruno. I think Carl's presentation or video is much more illustrative of what really happened. It was tragic. 8 dead, dozens injured, 38 homes destroyed. This line was put in the 50s, pre-code, prior to PHMSA even existing. I think even prior to the California PUC existing. And many aspects of this pipeline were actually grandfathered, which means that the modern regulations didn't apply to it. So you're having that occur on a national level. You're having things like Enbridge occur on a national level. It's making national news. But then you're having stuff occur locally. You had the Chevron spill in Salt Lake City. This is June. I think this was roughly 800 barrels. Very odd way it occurred. You had basically an electric short go to the pipeline, burn a hole through it at the bottom of a large hill. Also, the leak was below the leak capabilities of the pipeline, and right adjacent to a stream. Caused a lot of damage, but at the same time, you guys were lucky because it did go into your park where it could be intercepted. What made this worse is just a few months later, they had a second leak in December, and that one was caused by a lot of the remedial actions taken in June, where they actually filled the pipeline with water to check for other small little holes. Some water was left in a valve. You had your first cold snap in December and popped the top off the valve, or side off the valve. So then you resulted in spilling another 500 barrels. So that resulted in a $420,000 fine. Exxon has paid it. And also resulted in a corrective action order, which is almost complete, which has cost millions of dollars to make those enhancements. Another thing that locally, well, in the West, I call that local, is the Yellowstone River pipeline that failed in July of last year. Just like here, we had a large snowpack last year, and warm weather followed. Torrential runoff, it exposed a pipeline that had been built back in the 40s. I think this actually crossing, though, was 1991. And despite being almost 5 feet deep, it quickly eroded all or scoured all the cover off the pipeline and broke that. That pipeline has been directionally drilled under there. They've spent about $150 million in repairs on that pipeline. So there's a lot of things happening locally that make the news, and we can do a better job. I'll come back to that later. Okay, PHMSA, we have a very clear, PHMSA, like I said, is part of the US DOT. We have a very clear mission to ensure the safe, reliable, and environmental sound operation of the nation's pipeline transportation system. Sounds easy, but as I showed you earlier, we've got 2.5 million miles of pipe, 110 inspectors, about 300 state inspectors. So the task is daunting, especially after I see that video this morning. I just got really overwhelmed by that. There's 5 regional offices for PHMSA. You can see the 12 western states, Alaska, Hawaii, and the 10 western continental states are managed out of Denver. We have an office in Kansas City for the central region, Houston for the southwest region, Atlanta for the southern region, and Trenton, New Jersey for the eastern region. Okay, so what does PHMSA do? I just get right down to it. We do what the government does really well. We analyze data, we look at trends, we see how we can make improvements. We base our inspection program on that. We develop regulations. What we do in the western region, this third bullet, is what my primary task is to inspect and enforce. We administer state pipeline safety grants. That's the bulk of our program. We give money to the states to inspect the intrastate systems. We do damage prevention, public education, and R&D aimed at improving pipeline safety. So this is, I want to give a quick perspective on past performance. I'll go through these real fast because Carl touched upon these. Generally, pipeline safety, if you look at the U.S. population, energy consumption, and growing pipeline mileage, we are doing pretty well. The numbers are going down. The serious incidents are going down. Here's another one, pipeline incidents with death or injury. Still trending downwards. Liquid pipelines, not so good this last year. They actually had a little spike, but still generally trending downwards. But regardless, that's not good enough. And the reason we're trending downwards is we have learned since the Carlsbad accident in 2000, the Bellingham accident in 1999, we have gotten smarter as an agency. We've passed regulations that have made it easier for us to assess the pipeline, to check out how well the operators operate your pipeline, and also pass control room management regulations. So I really credit those 3 things, integrity management. When I say integrity management, you're talking about running smart pigs or these robotic devices through the pipeline to find corrosion and dents, gouges. We've reaped a lot of benefits from that, or the nation has. Operator qualification, we're making sure we have qualified staff running the pipeline, and control room management, we're making sure that their control systems are adequate. So I credit a lot of that for driving those numbers down. We also expanded regulatory coverage of pipelines in 2006 following the BP spill in Alaska. We're pulling in more and more pipelines that were previously uncovered. These are the low-stress lines. These are the gathering lines. You have them in Utah. You have them in the southwest Wyoming, western Colorado. So we're actually regulating more pipelines than we used to. We're doing a better job of collecting data. We've enhanced damage prevention, and we're getting better funding for our state partners. At one time, we couldn't even fund half the cost of a state program, and now we're up to 80%. But like I said earlier, that's still not good enough. When you see accidents like Carl had on those videos, it's just not good enough. You have these high-profile spills, high-profile explosions. We've had numerous in the last 2 years, so we know there's work to be done. We have 13 new NTSB recommendations. When they give us a recommendation, that means we can't ignore it. So we have to address each one of the recommendations. And NTSB, if you don't know, isn't part of the Department of Transportation. They actually report directly to Congress. So when they tell us to do something, we take it seriously, and we have to take it seriously. We're expecting even more after we find out about the results from the Enbridge spill in Michigan that occurred a couple years ago. We expect our Inspector General to make further recommendations on hazardous liquid pipelines. The Government Accounting Office is also giving us recommendations. I love the term recommendations because they're a little bit more than recommendations. They basically do something. We're spooling up a lot of workshops, and we're trying to implement or inspect to these new regulations we issued. Distribution integrity management, that is very important after Allentown. Control room management and public awareness. So we don't feel it's good enough, but also furthermore, Congress didn't feel it was good enough. And this is what Carl was talking about earlier. Just earlier this year, they passed the pipeline safety law, which just reauthorizes us for another 4 years. It does give us more inspectors. It does proposes more authority, but at the same time, it gives us more mandates. They want to give us stronger enforcement tools. They want us to do a better job at looking at, quote, grandfathered pipelines. They want us to look at other aspects of the aging infrastructure, spill plans, but also told us to look at, doing studies. And the reason we do these studies isn't because we want to do them just for the sake of doing this. The studies are all geared towards, should we pass rulemaking to enhance safety. Some of the studies are on valves, leak detection, expansion of integrity management rules, gathering lines, DILBIT transportation. DILBIT is an acronym, not an acronym, it's short for diluted bitumen. People are concerned that the oil sands coming out of Canada may be corrosive to pipelines out here in the U.S. and limiting consensus standards. Okay, so what are the agency priorities? We had our priorities, and then we had more priorities kind of lumped on top of us. We will continue to operationally focus on enforcing our regulations. I touched upon these: control room management, distribution. We're doing risk rankings of our inspections. We're trying to replace and train our retiring workforce. We're spending a lot of time scrutinizing construction. Like I said, we're doing a lot of that in Utah. But at the same time, we need to focus on the mandates we just got. So that was our priorities. That was our agenda prior to getting these new mandates. The major priorities, I guess I have to put this in a proper context. So we got this pipeline safety law. They're telling us to do something, but at the same time, we have to recognize it's the end of the administration. So we're being told by the administration, pick what is the most important rules that you want to get out. I mean, we have 20 rules that we may want to get out, but we're trying to pick the most important ones. The number one rule, and it's probably going to come out first, is federal enforcement on excavation damage. Basically what it is we want to incentivize states to take a strong role in enforcing people who, excavators who violate the damage prevention rule of that state. There will be monies tied to it. That's one thing the government has, is money to use as an incentive. But if the states don't pass don't pass enforcement regulations for excavators who knowingly damage a pipeline, then it gives us the ability to go after that excavator directly. We're also trying to tweak our hazardous liquid rules to fill in those few gaps that weren't addressed in the rules that were passed in the early 2000s. The ones that come to mind that really need to be filled are, leak detection, excess flow valves, making sure we have valves that can be remotely shut in the event of a spill. We're also trying to push a regulation out this year that will implement the law, which will double the fines that we can assess to operators who violate the regulations, from $1 million to $2 million. And then also we have gas rulemaking, and this is a direct response to San Bruno. We got to do a better job at making sure that they comply with our integrity management rules and do something about the grandfather clause, where they have older pipelines that don't even have to comply with the regulations as they are. Other new mandates you guys can read, but these are other mandates that we have to address, but I would say that aren't our top priorities for this year or for the last year of this administration, last year of this term. Excess flow valves, gathering lines, CO2, mapping, that's very important, getting all the data onto a national pipeline mapping system. So while these are regulatory priorities, they're not as high profile as these four that Well, there's 4 plus that MAOP one is a subset of gas rulemaking. Okay, and again, here's the studies that we've been asked to do: leak detection, cover over inland crossings of water, very important. You know, with ongoing erosion here in the West, anywhere, the lines that were installed back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, even up to the 80s, were usually trenched in, and that they can be eroded and eventually break if at certain river crossings. And the companies need to assess their crossings, and if they have to, possibly directly drill underneath those crossings. Again, diluted bitumen, excavation damage. Also looking at regulating other types of hazardous liquids. I don't know what that means, chemicals. I saw that in the law. I wasn't too sure what they meant by that. Previously, we've always dealt with petroleum products or CO2. Your opportunity to participate in some of these rulemaking processes or studies are here. You have a lot of workshops coming up in the near future, starting at the end of this month. There's a leak detection workshop and a valve workshop in D.C. I don't know where those other workshops are. They're usually in D.C. or Houston. Linda, how can I get...
On our website,
Okay.
also be issuing notices in advance.
Okay. So you can go to our website and you can see with that. I'm going to wait till everybody else gets up and we can have our open discussion. So thank you very much.